Rome was burning. For days, flames swallowed entire neighborhoods, leaving thousands homeless. And as the ash settled, people needed someone to blame. Suspicion turned toward one of the smallest, most misunderstood groups in the city, the Christians. Some were arrested, some were executed. But here's the real question. Did Nero actually believe they started the fire, or was something far more political happening underneath it all? By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how a natural disaster turned into one of history's earliest religious persecutions. In AD 64, Rome was the beating heart of the ancient world. Enormous, chaotic, and dangerously flammable, its wooden buildings packed tight along narrow streets. Fires were common, but nothing prepared the city for what began that July. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, flames broke out near the Circus Maximus and spread with terrifying speed, driven by strong winds through district after district. For days, Rome simply burned. Entire neighborhoods vanished. And once the smoke cleared, one question hung over the ruined city: who started it? Almost immediately, rumors turned toward the emperor himself. Nero had ambitious construction plans for Rome, and after the fire, an enormous new palace complex began rising from the ashes, timing that looked deeply suspicious to a grieving population. Later writers even claimed Nero calmly played music while watching Rome burn. But historians today are skeptical. The instrument in that famous story didn't even exist yet in ancient Rome, and Tacitus himself notes Nero was reportedly away from the city when the fire actually began. So if Nero hadn't started the fire, he still faced a serious problem, an angry city that needed someone to blame. At the time, Christianity was still a tiny, fledgling movement. Jesus had been executed decades earlier, and his followers were slowly spreading across the Roman world. In Rome itself, Christians were a small and often misunderstood minority who refused to take part in traditional Roman religious practices, worshiping one God and rejecting the state religion entirely. In a society where religion and political loyalty were deeply intertwined, that refusal alone made them look suspicious. After a disaster this size, suspicion had become extremely dangerous to carry. Tacitus gives us the most important surviving account of what happened next. Nero, he says, publicly blamed the Christians for the fire. Crucially, Tacitus notes that this accusation wasn't necessarily believed by everyone, but the Christians were already unpopular enough to make convenient targets. Some were arrested, then others identified through them. The punishments that followed were severe, public executions, and according to Tacitus, deliberately staged spectacles meant to horrify and entertain a grieving city. Nero had turned a small religious community into a public example, but the question remains, why them specifically? The likelier answer isn't that Nero simply hated this new religion. The real situation was more political than personal. Rome was in crisis, the population furious, rumors spreading uncontrollably, and the emperor needed to visibly demonstrate that someone was responsible. The Christians were small, already viewed with suspicion, and held virtually no political power to push back. Blaming them let Nero redirect anger away from his own palace. It's also worth noting this persecution appears to have stayed largely confined to Rome itself, not yet the empire-wide campaign against Christianity that later generations and later emperors would eventually carry out. Here's where the story gets genuinely complicated. While Nero's actions became one of the earliest documented examples of Roman persecution against Christians, historians still debate exactly how much of it he personally ordered versus simply allowed to happen. Tacitus, our best surviving source, was writing decades after the events themselves. We don't have a surviving government decree formally declaring war on Christianity. What we actually have is evidence of a brutal, localized persecution following a citywide disaster. And that distinction matters because history rarely arrives as neatly as the stories passed down about it. Nero's reign itself didn't last much longer. By AD 68, rebellion had spread across the empire. The Senate declared him an enemy of the state, and Nero fled Rome before ultimately taking his own life. But the story of his persecution outlived him. For Christians, Nero became a lasting symbol of religious hostility, his name forever tied to one of the faith's earliest trials by fire, quite literally. The deeper lesson stretches far beyond one emperor, though. When disaster strikes a society and people demand answers leaders can't honestly provide, history shows us again and again that a target sometimes gets offered instead. So why did Nero turn on the Christians? We can't know exactly what was in his mind, but the evidence points to a combination of political pressure, public suspicion, and a desperate need to redirect blame after Rome's greatest disaster. The Christians were small and vulnerable, and Nero turned that vulnerability into a convenient answer for a terrified city. The fire eventually went out. Rome rebuilt itself. Nero died within a few short years, but the persecution that followed the flames became a permanent part of his legacy, and centuries later, the story still survives, not just as one emperor's cruelty, but as a warning about what happens when fear spreads through a city and someone powerful decides to give that fear a name.